So, the relationship between Augustus and King Herod had its ups and downs, indeed, but the argument that his Roman granted title of king meant that his nation was exempt from taxes, tribute, census is just flat wrong. As I pointed up above, it had become a tribute-paying tributary since its conquest by Pompey long before King Herod gets his title. And some more below on this. Augustus never issued a decree to tax the whole world. Robin Lane Fox, the unauthorized version, Truth and Fiction in the Bible. It is doubtful, even doubtful, by the Emperor Augustus ever issued a decree to Rome's provinces that all the world should be taxed. Certainly, Romans did take censuses in the individual provinces, which were ruled directly by their governors. They were not, however, coordinated by an order from Augustus to all the world, at least so far as our evidence goes. You can read an argument from silence under historians' fallacies. As that evidence extends through histories, the skeptic says, local inscriptions in the papyrus returns of taxpayers in Egypt, it is immensely unlikely that a new edict of such consequence has escaped our knowledge. And I said, who are you trying to kid? You and I are looking at the same sources. No doubt. And there are huge gaps in the records. Immensely unlikely. So he goes on to say, in AD 6 we do know that Augustus was enacting a new tax on inheritance to help pay for his armies. By the way, the taxation to support his army is the main reason it is believed that Quirinius assisted in the taxing of 8 to 5 BC, his extended military maneuvers in the Pisidian highlands dating from around 12 BC would have required additional financing. Well, the objector says, however, the tax affected only Roman citizens, not Jews of Nazareth, and there was no need for a worldwide census to register their name. Now remember, the census in AD 6 is not the one of Luke 2:2 of 8 to 6 BC. But the census of AD 6 did hit the Jews pretty heavily. At least 600 talents as a nation, according to Josephus, Antiquities, cited in Jeremiah's Jerusalem in the times of Jesus as well. As a national tax, it did affect the Jewish folk. Loads like this are always distributed to the people, in addition to the already oppressive tax structure of the Herods. And Luke does not place the worldwide census at the time of the AD 6 tax, but rather puts it sometime before the Syrian-based one in 7 to 5 BC. But more accurately, Luke was probably not referring to a taxation census at all, simply a registration. Registrations were normally associated with 1. Taxation, 2. Military service. Jews were exempt, though. And 3. Special government ballots. We have conclusive evidence that an empire-wide, in decree, not necessarily execution, of course, registration occurred in the time frame described by Luke. Martin, in his work, summarizes the literary, archaeological, and iconographic evidence for this. And we quote, a sixth reason for placing the nativity of Jesus in 3 or 2 BC is the coincidence of this date with the New Testament account that Jesus was born at the time when a Roman census was being conducted. There went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the Romans worldwide should be registered. Luke 2:1. The historians have not been able to find any empire-wide census or registration in the years 7 to 5 BC, but there is a reference to such a registration of all the Roman people not long before 5 February 2 BC, written by Caesar Augustus himself. Quote, while I was administering my 13th consulship, 2 BC, the Senate and the equestrian order and the entire Roman people gave me the title Father of my country. This award was given to Augustus on 5 February 2 BC. Therefore, the registration of citizen approval must have taken place in 3 BC. Orosius, in the 5th century, also said that Roman records of his time revealed that a census was indeed held when Augustus was made the first of men, an apt description of his award, Father of the country, at a time when all the great nations gave an oath of obedience to Augustus. Orosius dated the census to 3 BC, and besides that, Josephus substantiates that an oath of obedience to Augustus was required in Judea not long before the death of Herod. This agrees nicely in a chronological sense with what Luke records. But more than that, an inscription found in Paphlagonia, eastern Turkey, also dated to 3 BC, mentions an oath sworn by all the people in the land at the altars of Augustus and the temples of Augustus in the various districts. And dovetailing precisely with this inscription, the early 5th century, Armenian historian Moses of Corinth said the census that brought Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem was conducted by Roman agents in Armenia, where they set up the image of Augustus Caesar in every temple. The similarity of this language is strikingly akin to the wording of the Paphlagonian inscription describing the oath taken in 3 BC. These indications can allow us to reasonably conclude that the oath of Josephus, the Paphlagonian inscription, and Orosius, and the census mentioned by Luke, Orosius, and Moses of Corinth were one and the same. All of these things happened in 3 BC. What this means is that we have very, very, very clear evidence of an empire-wide registration in the time frame required. How much more data do you need? So, in Judea, the skeptic says, under Quirinius, we know from Josephus' histories of something more appropriate, not a worldwide decree, but a local census in AD 6 to assess Judea, when the province passed from rule by Herod's family to direct rule by Rome. Although this census was local, it caused a notorious outcry, not least because some of the Jews argued that the innovation was contrary to Scripture and the will of God. According to the third Gospel, the census which took Joseph to Bethlehem was the first while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Well, blue font, I have already pointed out that the first, while is probably a mistranslation of the text, before is more in line with Koine idiom. So Quirinius' census was indeed the first, but it belonged to AD 6 when King Herod, the story's other marker, was long since dead. I make a couple of concluding points here in the blue font. Augustus might have issued a worldwide census decree, a record of which is only preserved in Luke's Gospel, is altogether reasonable and plausible. The data about Augustus's propensity to count and tax is well known. For example, he documents in his own records how he counted the Roman nation some 3 times, and increasingly levied detailed taxes throughout his reign, with the attendant increase in bribery and vice. As vain as he was, it would not be surprising at all for this to have occurred. Second point, it was also customary for the Roman Empire to take a census when there was a change of local government. For example, when Archelaus was deposed in AD 6, one of Quirinius' first tasks was to liquidate his estate, hold a census to determine the tribute load. The implication of this pattern for our discussion is that when Varus became governor of Syria in 7 BC, one of his first acts would have been to take a census, the one which would have produced the trip from Nazareth to Bethlehem. For we know Augustus instituted a 14-year census cycle for Egypt. Not only does this give us more confirmation that Augustus was a counting sort of guy, but it may reflect a local execution of a worldwide decree of Augustus. To assert that Augustus did not make such a decree is an affirmative historical document, and the burden of proof for any historical assertion always rests upon its author. And to argue that Luke was wrong because there was no worldwide decree, because we don't have a record of the specific decree, is to make a common mistake in historical method, arguing from slim silence. Some silence arguments can be made to work, but Hackett again says evidence must always be affirmative. Negative evidence is a contradiction in terms. It is no evidence at all. The non-existence of an object, read worldwide decree, is established not by non-existence evidence, we can't find in the decree so far, but by affirmative evidence of the fact that it did not or could not exist, a document that says it did not happen. So, and in spite of the above methodological and background problems, we do have concrete evidence of a world empire-wide Augustan registration, literary, archaeological, iconographic. To summarize this section on the missing census of 75 BC, I have affirmative evidence and good arguments for such a census. Luke, a very, very, very reasonable, reliable historian, says so. Augustus was this type of person with repeated known actions along this line. These kinds of events occurred at major changes in ruling personnel, a situation that obtained in Palestine at the time Luke indicates. Parallel events occurred in other Roman-controlled areas in roughly the same time, such as in Egypt. There is not a scrap of evidence of contrary data. Quirinius' participation in such an event, along with Varus, is not only possible but highly likely. We have positive evidence of an empire-wide decree of Augustus within a year or two of the required date. Glenn Miller. So there we go.